with Margy Henderson is called Living Well and Dying Well. That can mean so much. Living as if things will end, and yet there's something about the truth of us being here that alters everything by our love for or passion for what we do. So today's theme is an interview with Veronica Torres, the channeler for Eloheim, a deep and very trustworthy wisdom in my life. Are you able to hear us, Veronica?
Yes, hello, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for calling in and being part of this hour of Living Well and Dying Well. So, Veronica, would you be able to introduce yourself and say what the work of Eloheim is for you?
Sure. My name is Veronica Torres, and I live in Sonoma. I've been here since 1999, and I've been channeling Eloheim and the Council since 2002. We have public sessions here in Sonoma. I also do private sessions over the phone. And we have big events coming up in 2015, including a retreat in Sonoma in October. I find the work of Eloheim specifically to be extremely transformational in the way that I and the other people who are studying it approach our interactions with habitual living and the ways that society supports us staying the same and resists us changing and transforming and becoming bigger and maybe expressing our gifts in various ways. And Eloheim's work is extremely helpful in identifying those patterns and then giving us specific tools and support to step-by-step have a different relationship to those same stimulus.
Well, it's been a long path for you, and the changes that have come with the information in my life have been profound, and I'm very, very grateful to have come into your life. So Veronica and I have become soul family with each other over these last years, and that very deep respect and love that lives in this chosen family is very it's very big and very important to me. So, Veronica, the work for me has been evolutionary because hearing it from the beginning has given me time to slowly grow through the process of being more alert to the baggage that I bring to my life, the old stories, the fears that I just internalized and didn't know were optional for me, to now living at this higher vibrational, more peaceful and confident level of interacting with my world. And for people who are listening, they may not have experienced that transformation through time. And so the work that Eloheim is offering right now is it's mind-blowing, really. But for people who wouldn't be familiar with the work, how does one enter this wisdom from Eloheim?
Well, there are many ways to access the archived information that we have. We have 500 YouTube videos. I have years and years and years of recorded sessions. I've published 26 books, among other products. But I think that all of that just supports that place that people come to that I call being ripe, which for me means they're at that place where they're ready to say, I am willing to see things a new way. I am willing to break out of a habitual pattern. I am willing to disrupt relationships that are no longer serving me, that aren't making me a better woman or a better man, that aren't helping me be a better person in the world. I'm ready to change my default behaviors that aren't giving me the life and the lifestyle that I really want or really dream of. So I think it all begins with the I am willing space. just like anything else, if you're going to start working out or change your diet or quit smoking or drinking or anything that involves big change, there has to be that willingness place. It's really hard to as Elohim says, don't wait around for someone else to drag you into your dreams. It's unlikely to happen. So it starts with the I am willing, and then we have lots of information to support that choice once it's made.
And the goal or intention of the work is what? Why would people be drawn to changing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of people look around the world and say, I don't like what I see. I don't like how it is. I don't like what's going on. And in order to affect change in our communities and our country and our society, we have to start with the inside of each of ourselves. So if you're looking to create transformation in a larger community, you need to make sure that you're bringing the best of you to that community, that you're offering the best of you to that conversation. And a lot of times the best of us, before we've done any self-introspection, is what we call an old version of you, meaning your 20-year-old self or your 30-year-old self, who has completely different dreams, goals, and experiences, and often lots more fears. Or you just bring your fearful self to a conversation. And Elohim's work really helps you bring your what is true now, current version of you, accessing the moment and awareness of what's actually going on for you, self, to any interaction.
And it feels to me that this time that we're living, where we're pressed up against so many changes that look fearful, that the Elohim work has helped me to recognize those patterns that are around me and yet respond to them differently than I would have otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that opportunity that lives in the moment, and a lot of teachers talk about the moment, and what's really weird about the idea of the moment is no one usually explains how to get there and to deal with what you find. Because what I've discovered over the years is that the moment is a pretty scary place. Because the survival instinct tells you, look, keep reliving the past so you don't make mistakes that might get you killed, and keep projecting into the future so you can avoid things that might get you killed. So the moment's a dangerous place for the survival instinct because it's not on guard in the way that it traditionally is. And so the tendency is for you to be pulled out of the moment by the adrenaline and the fears that the survival instinct is in charge of. So even just in the idea of being able to access the moment and resist the pull of the past and the future and say, what is here now? That's a transformational act in itself. And to face what you find when you're there. What is true now? I don't like what I'm living. Okay, let's start from there and see where you want to build to.
I remember in the early years of the Elohim teachings, there was a lot of explanation, and the work is so practical. It's not just big theories that make us, curious. It's practical, day-to-day tools. And so I remember in the beginning, there was a lot of focus on something called the core emotion. Mm-hmm. And so each of us seemed to have a particular place in us that is a kind of default challenge place. Can you describe that?
Yeah, Elohim describes the core emotion as the theme of this lifetime. And each one of us has a unique theme of the lifetime that we're in. No matter what your core emotion is, you're the only one doing it the way you're doing it. And that core emotion is the thing that you've come here to study in every moment of every day. Now, study is kind of a weird word. I don't exactly like using it, but it fits in this moment in the sense that every single moment of every single day of your entire incarnation, Your core emotion is active, and meaning it's giving you opportunities to explore what it brings up for you.
Can you give a for instance of what a core emotion is?
Sure, I'll give you mine. So
okay.
there's two aspects of the core emotion. There's the unhealed version and there's the healed version. The 99% of the people are running around in their unhealed core emotion their whole lives. So my unhealed core emotion is fear of getting kicked out of the tribe. So that, especially when I was younger, created a lot of behavior that was people-pleasing, that didn't take into consideration my own feelings or concerns or truth, that worried that I disappointed people or let people down, that made other people's dreams be my dreams rather than my own. You know, I think a lot of people have a similar sort of idea, but because I'm a unique individual, that idea is being explored by me in a unique way. And somebody could say, well, you know, I know a lot of people who are people pleasers. There's a difference when you're a people pleaser and when it's your core emotion. When your core emotion is active, it's about 10 or 20 times as powerful as anybody else having a similar idea that day. And here's a funny example of that. Had a lady who was a substitute teacher in high school, and she was teaching a class, and the class was almost over, and the bell was going to ring in just a minute or two, and she was done with the lesson. So she went and stood by the door so the kids wouldn't leave before the bell rang, and the kids kind of started lining up to go out of the door when the bell rang. And she wasn't in any sort of danger or threatened by any of these kids. That wasn't the situation. She was just standing at the door, and she was rocking back and forth on her heels. And one of the kids said, "You're rocking back and forth on your heels." Now, this seems really innocuous. Like, this is not a threatening moment. This isn't scary. Nothing unusual happened to us. But because it reflected her core emotion, she went home and cried for 4 hours. So when it's your core emotion, boom, it hits you in a very, very, very deep place. And you can react from that in a very unhealed way. Now, when you work with Elohim, they will teach you the healed version of your core emotion, so that even though you're still learning about the same impulse, you're addressing it from a transformed perspective.
Well, what's the healed core emotion of getting kicked out of the tribe?
The healed core emotion of getting kicked out of the tribe is when I am in my truth, I attract authentic community. So whenever now I find myself impulsed to react in a people-pleasing way, I remind myself, if I come from my truth, the people who will be pleased by that are my authentic community.
Well, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so I'm not out trying to please, the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker to feel like I'm safe. Instead, I'm taking care of myself in a way to allow authentic community to resonate with that.
I think when we talked about it early on, my core emotion was something like fear of not being enough. And the healed version of that is when I recognize any kind of anxiety about something might be expected of me that I'm not good at, like the previous radio hour, for instance, then I use that awareness to drop into this moment and allow the thought that even doing something that I would previously judged as not enough, whatever I bring is enough, and it's important that I keep showing up without that fear, and to live without being triggered by that anymore or fearful of that is spectacular. I can go into a room where before I would have had an ego issue about will people think well of me or something, and now I just go in and I'm curious and available and open to what happens. I don't need that same kind of assurance. But I think that was a years-long process with Elohim, just gently showing us tools for getting to that clarity. So go ahead.
Sorry. I would say that also, one of the things about the unhealed and healed core emotions, as Elohim's been very careful about, is it's not the opposite. One is coping, the other is transforming, right? So we typically cope with our unhealed core emotion. like with mine, I would be wanting to people please, but maybe I would suppress that urge. That's just coping. Instead, now I have a transformed way to look at it. And so when you were referring to your heel core emotion, you use the similar language. I'm not enough, I am enough. And that we try never to use that opposite sort of language.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I would say something like, I feel like I'm afraid I'm not enough, and I offer a unique contribution.
Yes, that is more what it feels like.
Yeah,
and I didn't have words for it. And it's helpful to have those words because it's so easy to slide back into, this
yes, it is.
habitual way of looking at things.
Especially since a lot of the clients that I have are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. There's some in the 20s and there's some in the 80s. But, they kind of in that range of people who've had enough stuff happen in life to realize, wait, I want it to be different than it is. You figure you've had 40 years of doing something the same way, your core emotion. You move the garbage can and it takes you a week to remember that you did that, throwing stuff on the floor over and over again until you're like, wait, I moved the garbage can. So I think we have to be very kind to ourselves when we imagine transformation. It's not an overnight flip of the switch kind of process, because that would be very unkind and very disturbing to the physical body, most likely. It's what Eloheim has called, it's more like a dimmer switch, you're turning that knob, and if you keep consistently turning it, the light comes up and you have illumination.
It seems that fear, or the survival instinct, is notched up so high that for some of us, our adrenaline is, it's just always sort of on. And I wonder if you can mention some of the tools about actually being in the moment without having that anxiety arise.
Well, I think that there's always anxiety because we have a survival instinct and we live in a dualistic place that includes life-death, right? And so there's always going to be some anxiety in facing change, challenge, or something that's, unexpected. It's how long we stay in that anxiety without offering it any other feedback, and if we are, if we are compelled to make our decisions from that place of anxiety. So coming into the moment and going, ooh, something's going on here, my favorite tool for that moment is what is true now. And the answer to that question is rapid fire and based in the very mundane. What is true now? I'm driving the car. What is true now? It's Tuesday. What is true now? It's 5 o'clock. What is true now? I have on black pants. What is true now? I'm a woman. Whatever. And you do 5 or 10 of those, and it can break you out of the habitual response to a new stimulus and give you instead the response of bringing you deeper and deeper into the moment and to the awareness of what's actually going on right now, rather than being responded to from an old version of you or a projected version of you. So that's my favorite. That's my go-to. The other one that's super powerful is I'm tempted to. So if you find yourself in a reaction, you just put the words I'm tempted to in front of it. So you get an email that's upsetting and your initial impulse is to be angry. I'm mad about this. How about I'm tempted to be mad about this? By simply adding those 3 words in front of the sentence or in front of the sentiment inside yourself, you change the portion of your brain that you're using to process that information, which gives you a total leg up on not having a habitual reaction, but instead having a real reaction that's based in this moment and your current truth.
I know that it works in reality, but does it work in theory? So when that happens for me, when I'm in the moment and I'm noticing and I'm choosing to be more present to the moment, and then I add I'm tempted to, it feels like maybe that's the other part of the brain you're talking about. I go into kind of my observer self, kind of watching my flailing little emotional self in that moment, and the training, I guess, of being more in our witness self, or our is it, how would you describe that layer of awareness?
Yeah, for me, I experience it as the part of me that's not running away from myself or running outside of myself. It's as though sometimes when there's a trigger and there's a reaction to a stimulus that feels uncontrollable. It's like a fire raging out of control, or the horses being let out of a barn and they're all just running helter-skelter, you know? That triggered state of out of control kind of thing. When I'm able to use I'm tempted to and what is true now, I feel like I'm inside my body instead of sort of stretched out and my field is big and I don't feel like I have my epicenter intact when I'm triggered. So for me, that's the physical experience that I have about the whole thing is you know, it feels very wispy and far out and away from my ability to have any effect on the moment if I have the triggered space happening. And when I come into the moment with what is true now, I'm tempted to some of the other tools that Elohim has taught us. It gives me the opportunity to bring all of me or as much of me as possible to the situation.
I think that many people are wondering what their real work is, or how to be their real self in kind of the constraints that they experience of job or finances or something. So when we have that urge, what would we gain from the information that Elohim offers?
Well, I think a lot of people feel constrained. You know, occasionally Elohim will say, all right, everybody, what is it you want us to teach you the most? Like, what would you like to put on the agenda for the coming year? And almost everyone says, I want to be the big version of me. I want to be that bigger version of me that I know is inside me, that I'm somehow hesitant to explore. That's almost always the answer. And at first that surprised me, but, you know, year on and year on, we've done this like 3 times, and it's always like 80% of the people say that. And so this seems to be a common sentiment, right? And the hesitation I think people have is sometimes they believe that it's circumstance dependent. And I don't believe that. I believe that we can show up as the big version of us no matter what we're doing. It's just having the idea of what that big version of you is. I think people misconstrue that idea. For me, the big version of me is connected to my truth, not on some projected future, but in this actual current moment, and being vulnerable enough to express that to another person or to a situation as it's needed. And the difference between vulnerability and weakness is that when you're weak, you feel that survival instinct fear. When you're vulnerable, you're creating surface area for connection with others through accessing your own truth. And that piece, I think, is the missing piece. People are too connected to it needs to look like a grand slam home run in order to count as me being big, when really any second you can show up with that completeness of you, be vulnerable with your truth, and be present in that moment without letting the survival instinct drag you around. And that's a big person in the sense of energetically big that we're talking about. That's a fully present person.
Well, those are the people I certainly like to be around. And when I'm in that state, that's when my life is happier. Mm-hmm. I think that because there's many environmentalists, many social justice activists who listen to this station, that there is an overwhelming need for radical change in the world. Yeah. And so a lot of people do have really big jobs, you know, that need to be done, and a sense of inadequacy about being able to do that.
Yeah. But the reality is every single thing that's ever been done, from the Empire State Building to the Great Wall of China to anything, cleaning a creek, is done step by step. And the focus needs to be on the step you're on. Now, it's great to have a plan, a trajectory even, to say, we're going to do XYZ. Great. What are we going to do now, in this second? I've got 25 volunteers. What do I want their hands and bodies and brains and eyes and ears doing in this moment to further those ideas that we have of a big picture? And one of the greatest things Elohim's ever said, I think, is if the step you're on feels overwhelming, it's too big of a step. Break it up into smaller steps. And I think that's the secret ingredient to any kind of societal change, is what's a small step that we can act on right now. And to make sure that you're not so fixated on an end run, an end goal, an end result, an outcome is what Elohim calls it, which is funny because I just said in, and then they say outcome. So anyway, I'm being amused by that. To not be so fixated on an outcome that you lose sight of what the current moment is revealing to you about the path you're walking. Because as you take a step, you get to see again what is real now, what is true now, what is the facts of this moment, what are the resources we have available to us, how can we pivot to a new trajectory that's more powerful than the one we imagined? Because remember, the outcome you're imagining is an outcome that was created from a previous version of you. It's not the version of you that's on step 5. Step 5 knows more stuff, and it may be able, if it's allowed to see a trajectory that's healthier, faster, better, more fun, more productive, more interesting, more effective, if it's allowed to. So I think that's another really important thing, is the step you're on has to always be, 1, where you are now, what you're actually touching, and 2, making sure that the trajectory you're pointed at is still the trajectory you're interested in following, as the changing you is present in the new moment.
That was life-changing for me when they taught that.
Yeah.
That the trajectory is just our leaning in the moment toward the next moment, but that it really does lead on a path of amazing change that I wouldn't have figured out in that first step.
Yeah.
There's more available and more circumstances that come toward us, I think. I think life comes toward us in a different way when we're available to it like that.
Yeah, because sometimes people get caught up in it's got to be this way, and you get 20 people together and you hold up signs and say, it should be this way, this is the way it should be. And if that how it should be isn't allowed to evolve as you change, grow, experience new things, meet new people, have new people come into your organization and leave your organization, if that how it should be isn't also maturing, I feel like it's trying to, put a square peg in a round hole at some point. You might be able to get that square peg in that round hole, but you're going to have to take a little bit of the edges off that square peg, and that process feels uncomfortable to me. I like the idea of, if you imagine a bunch of stepping stones in circular patterns, so there's one stepping stone in the middle with a ring of stepping stones around it, and it goes out from there, maybe 5 or 6 or 10 rounds of that. And if you imagine that you're at the far end of one of those stepping stones, so the center one is away from you, and you take one step forward, that's the step you're on, and then you imagine, okay, I'm going straight ahead, straight toward noon. Let's say you're at 6 o'clock and you're going toward noon. Noon is right. I'm going to noon. As you take each step, it may be that to get to noon, you have to go a couple to the side or a couple the other way or zigzag. You don't know. It's not necessarily a straight line. And the only way I think people really know that is if they continue to reevaluate in the moment as the truth of them is revealed, what's the truth of this next step with the idea of a bigger picture in mind.
Can you also describe the way that Elohim showed the difference between looking for certainty and looking for clarity?
Yeah. So most of the time, the temptation is to fixate on the idea that until I'm certain, I can't act. That idea is that, I'll feel safe once I'm certain, and then once I'm safe and certain, I can act. And a lot of people resist actually taking on new projects, new jobs, new lovers, new whatever they've got going on, because it doesn't feel certain. And if you've got a real tight version of what certain is, it can keep you from doing anything, like not even leaving the house. Eloheim offers the idea that what we're really looking for is clarity. And again, the only place to find clarity, surprise, the moment. And that's in evaluating your current truth right now.
Why does that lead to clarity?
Because clarity is based not on appeasing the survival instinct, but on being aware of what your truth is as you ask for it in this moment. What is real for me right now? And only in that moment can you say, even though I'm scared to death about the idea of trying for a new job, if I stay at this job any longer, I'm going to be the most unhappy person that's ever lived. So the certainty is not present in this equation. Clarity is I have to make a change even though I'm uncertain about what it will look like. I have to make a change for my own peace, health, sanity.
Yes.
So your truth in the moment gives you awareness of clarity. Action on clarity is not certainty. Action on clarity is actually exploring uncertainty, because uncertainty is the only place where creativity gets to live, right? You look at a blank canvas, it's completely uncertain where the paint's going to land. And that's okay, because painters have found a way to feel comfortable with the uncertainty of a blank canvas, or with the uncertainty of a blank piece of paper for a writer. It's only when we attach the uncertainty piece to survival or safety that we start to be really, really anxious about it instead of embracing it as the blank slate that it represents.
I'd like to just say that this is Living Well and Dying Well show, and we're talking with Veronica Torres, channeler for a wisdom called Eloheim. So the living in a state of a vulnerable embrace of uncertainty, there's a kind of vibrancy that is so different than trying to walk through looking for certainty. And that vibrancy feels like it's a consciousness that is always available when we're open to it. Does that feel right?
Yeah, vibrancy is a word that I wouldn't have used, although I can feel that it's the right word for you, because a lot of times uncertainty feels disruptive to me, not vibrant. It's not that it doesn't feel juicy. It just feels like anything could happen, which, I don't know. Vibrancy isn't a word I use typically, so that word didn't settle with me, but juiciness is a word, so maybe it's the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that the teachings on uncertainty have been some of the most powerful, because the idea here was that you don't know anything.
I know. People were offended.
We got so many emails. Eloheim said, you don't know anything, and this is a great thing. And people wrote emails saying, I'm smart, I know stuff. Because a lot of very, very intelligent people, the PhD factor, the degree factor, or the very accomplished people in education and arts and healing skills that come to our circle is really common. People who've done a lot of work on themselves is very, very common, and there are lots of really big brains. And Eloheim said, you don't know anything, and people got offended until they realized that it was like the nicest thing anyone could say. Because what it let them off the hook for is having to know everything in order to feel safe. And then you get that information gathering thing as a path, which doesn't necessarily allow you to feel good about yourself. It just keeps you getting more information. And so when you say, I don't know anything, it allows you to acknowledge the infinite nature of what's out there and to figure out what actually feels juicy to you, instead of gathering all information you possibly can as a striving to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really fun for me, because as the previous discussion, the people-pleasing thing was like, I have to always look smart, or I have to always know everything, or, oh, God, I didn't get that answer right, someone's not going to like me, was a lot of pressure, because who can know everything, I mean, I'm a big brain, but I'm certainly not Mensa, so I don't have that instant recall. I'm not going to win Jeopardy, right? So it can be very difficult if you put that kind of pressure on yourself and then still don't feel safe. So it was really nice for me to be like, I don't know. Just becoming extremely comfortable with being able to say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And not have that feel like a weakness, but feel like a vulnerability, a place to create surface area for another person where I could just say, they would say blankety blank blank, and I would just be able to say, I don't know, and not be triggered by that. Have it be my actual in-the-moment truth. It created opportunities. Instead of being the know-it-all, it became the opportunity to connect around the discovery of new information and new connection. It was beautiful.
That is beautiful.
And really, what do we know? We don't even know how many hairs are on our own heads. What do you know if you don't even know that? You carry this head around with you all the time. You can't even tell yourself how many hairs you have in your eyebrows. And yet, somehow we're supposed to know everything? It's ludicrous. And it's such a freeing thing to be able to say, I don't know. That being able to say no with no explanation, those two are really amazing.
Say more about that.
Just to be able to say no. When someone says, do you want to come to this thing, you can just say no as a complete sentence with no need for explanation or justification or apology. The freedom that comes from that one suggestion. Eloheim just would say to people, just start saying no to everything. Say no. Someone calls you up, you want to come over? No. And then once you're off the phone with them, you have a minute to breathe, get in touch with your truth, not be caught up in what they want, but ask yourself what you want. And if you actually turn out to want to go on that adventure, you can call back and say, hey, you know what? I've had a change of plans. I can come. Most people are perfectly okay with that. And the ones that aren't, it's a good thing to know that about them now rather than down the road. The liberation of just saying no. I love it. I love it so much.
Well, within the vast amount of work that has been channeled, what year did it start in a public way?
2002.
Yeah, wow. So
yeah,
a dozen years of information that's come through, and the information has evolved, I think, as you personally have been able to integrate it. And right now, what do you feel can you describe a sort of overview, general, what is the work, what is the general intention, do you think, of the work of Eloheim?
Isn't that a great question? I think the general overall intention, there's a couple layers to it. We've already touched on the first layer. Basically, don't be habitual. Here's how you don't be habitual. Right? That's pretty much it. But the layer that's juicier for me now, because that layer I'm better at than I used to be, is the layer of the awareness that we are 100% responsible for our reactions to our experiences, regardless of what those experiences are. And that's a heavy thing to put on somebody, but you know what? It's the truth, so we may as well just face it. Something happens, you react. You are 100% responsible for that reaction. Something you read online, something you hear on the news, something you hear in the grocery store, and you have a reaction to it, and you say, I can't help myself, that's just how I react. You can help yourself, and you must. You're responsible for how you react. Now, some people just love to react with habitual anger and frustration and victimhood and spouting off, and hey, everybody's got free will. Do as you wish. But if you want to contribute something else to the conversation, that's the place where it begins, is in that moment where you take 100% reaction for 100% responsibility for your reactions. And the way Eloheim likes to illuminate this is, you reach in the refrigerator, you grab the jug of orange juice, it slips out of your hand, the cap flies off, and it spills all over the floor. How are you going to react to that? For a lot of people, curse words and feeling like an idiot and wasting money and wasting time and, oh, God, now what am I going to have with my breakfast? And sort of that victim stance is the first reaction. There are other ways to involve yourself with the fact of that orange juice. You get down there on the floor and you're cleaning it up, and you're kind of doing the meditation of the cleaning of the floor. It can be a very meditative experience. You could say a lot of things. And it's the fact that we get to choose and what we're offering. And if you imagine, it's kind of interesting if you imagine like there's a 3-year-old in the room and standing there watching you. And you drop the orange juice and you cuss and you yell and you scream and you stomp and you look like the world is coming to an end. The kid looks at you and says, that's what I'm learning. I'm learning that when something unexpected happens, I should act like the world is coming to the end. If instead the juice falls on the floor and you interact with it in a way that says, this too can be constructive in my life, that's what the 3-year-old learns. Now, not all of us have a 3-year-old around, but our emanation, the energy that we send into the world through our choices of how to react to our experiences, is being felt and is affecting the rest of the world. So in essence, we have that observer, that 3-year-old observer, always, even though we don't have it in our physical home. And that energetic that emanates out into the world is also magnetic. And so what you put out is pulling matching frequencies to you. So if you're grumpy when you drop the orange juice and other people are grumpy when you meet them in the store, let's see if we can, break that cycle. And yes, after Elohim used this example for like 3 years, that exact thing happened to me, and I laughed my butt off. Mm-hmm. I reached into the fridge, I pulled it out, and I hadn't put the lid on properly. And, of course, the day you don't put the lid on properly is the day it slips out of your hand. Slipped out of my hand, went all over the floor, all over my feet, and I'm standing in my kitchen just laughing so hard that I actually spilled the orange juice.
Actually, on the way here, my bottle of lemonade fell on the carpet, and there is something so real about the step-by-step progression of the Elohim teaching that there really is no trigger in that anymore. It's just information. It's like, oh, that'll have to be rinsed off. I'll remember to rinse that off. And the freedom that gives me of not feeling like an idiot or worrying about somebody's opinion about things like that is enormous. And I do feel more effective in the world because when I'm in a state of openness to everything that comes in my circumstance, then beautiful things come all the time. Yeah. And so it is a scientific kind of magnetism of states of being matching resonance, I call it. Mm-hmm. Well, part of the work, and we're getting toward the latter part of the hour, talking with Veronica Torres about the wisdom of Elohim. And one of the things that's been so helpful is that over the years, there's been a very progressive description of the ways that we can be in this world and these levels of consciousness. You've put together for us in a game. It's not really a game, but it looks like a game of cards.
It's a deck.
It's a deck that's called Learn How to Create Your Reality. And the step-by-step guide of going from the level of feeling like a victim in life and the anxiety of that to the level of I am responsible for how I respond to circumstances is a progressive skill building. And I'm glad you mentioned step by step, because often when we look at a spiritual path, we kind of try to fit ourselves into the ascended master portion of it, So
Don't
describe the levels.
Yeah.
Describe the levels of consciousness.
Sure. So a while ago, about 3 years ago, Elohim one day asked me to round up a whiteboard. They wanted to draw. Now, I thought that was interesting. And they were able to do it, which was impressive to me, too. Considering when I first started channeling, I could not open my eyes, I could not move my arms, and I didn't really have any ability to interact with the world to get to the point where my eyes are open, they're sitting in a chair, they're writing on a whiteboard, working the pen and sharing their ideas, erasing sometimes even. It's so impressive to me that we've managed to integrate to the point where we can do stuff like that. But they wanted to explore their idea of fractal living, which is the idea that in every moment there are multiple ways to interact with that moment. And an example is, right now I'm sitting in my office, I'm talking to you, talking to your radio listeners. That's one level that I'm interacting. I also have my computer on, and I can see screens on my computer. My cats are here. There's carpet beneath my feet. There's dust in the carpet. All those different levels are places that I can interact on. And in any moment, I'm choosing where to put my attention. It's a pretty general way of saying it. Each moment, we're choosing where to put our attention. So Eloheim came up with this idea that in this fractal way of living, each layer of our response to our experiences can be identified and described. And so they have given out the levels of creating, and it starts with level 1, which is duality. Yes, no, right, wrong, on, off, up, down, black, white, dead, alive, right? That very, very simplistic way of seeing the world. And I don't like to talk about it too much because I don't find it comfortable to even discuss, but I think people can figure it out. Level 2 is victimhood, and that's the level where it happened to me, people are out to get me, the world is, not a fair place, basically where everything is against you and lined up to take you down rather than support you. And a lot of behavior defaults to level 2. Someone pulls in front of you on the freeway, it's very easy to immediately be like, why did he do that to me? Why is he acting like that? And it takes something to see that another way in many cases. Level 3 is I create my reality, which is a concept many people are familiar with, and I don't like what I've created. We call this the hamster wheel level because it tends to create circular thinking, where you say, I created the rain today. Oh, man, I have to go out in the rain today. Why did I create the rain today? Now my shoes are going to get wet. Oh, I hate when I create the rain. But we need the rain, but I hate the rain. But I hate, that whole thing where you just go in circles and circles and circles. Anytime you find yourself in circular thought, you're in level 3, according to the Elohim teachings. And the problem is a lot of spiritual teachings stop at level 3. You create your reality, create something better, and then they just leave you there to try to figure out what the heck that means, which is very uncomfortable. So Elohim got sick of people saying, I created this and it sucks, and this is why they came up with this teaching. And so their teachings really kick in on what they call level 4, which is I choose my reactions to my experiences. I take 100% responsibility for how I react to everything I encounter. And the interesting thing about level 4 is you do a lot of choosing. It's a workout level because you're constantly saying, oh, I'm defaulting to hamster wheel, I'm defaulting to habit, I'm defaulting to duality, I'm defaulting to victimhood, and I'm going to choose another reaction. And you keep choosing and choosing and choosing and choosing. There's a lot of choosing that goes on. But every time you choose, you're using a different part of your brain, you're changing your vibration, you're changing your emanation, you're magnetizing new things to you, you're transforming your life step by step.
So before, when there was a adrenaline reaction when somebody pulls in front of me or yells, now it's, I noticed that somebody's pulled in, I'm going to back off, and that's not triggered anymore.
Yeah. You're not taking it as a personal affront. You're addressing it as a fact. Right? That's the other thing, is how about we just address things as the facts that they represent, rather than have like a whole story attached to it that, of course, is attached to, that person pulled in front of me just like all these other people have treated me bad my whole life, instead of that person pulled in front of me. Stop. That's a period. That person pulled in front of me. That's going to change how I drive today because I need to make room for this person who pulled in front of me. And anything past that is a choice I'm making to allow myself to make assumptions, stories, act on preconceived notions.
And this, I think, is also the level where when we notice that there's a physical sensation of survival instinct reaction, that we're choosing then to calm down, to breathe, to to trust that I don't need to be certain about this, and
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, it's a choosing place, it gives you the opportunity to choose. Like today, after our interview, it's finally raining in California. Huzzah, that's so fabulous. And I just realized I don't even know if I have an umbrella. I don't know where it is. We haven't needed it for 3 years. And I thought, I'm going out in the rain. I'm going to have to make choices about being in the rain. Now, a choice could be, darn it, why is it raining on a day I have errands? I don't want to get wet. Well, that's not going to help me to think that way. The fact is, it's raining on a day I have errands. Therefore, I get to explore what it's like to get wet for the first time in several years. And that's just a kind of a silly example, because a lot of times the examples are far more powerful. A spouse or child does something that's difficult. You have a challenge with your boss at work, and it's super easy to use all of those as reasons why you're not seen, you're not heard, you're not appreciated, you're not loved, you're not honored or respected. And it's like, okay, those things may actually be facts, but there's something beyond just sitting and stewing in that.
And just as an overview, too, that these levels, the fractal nature of them, goes even higher and higher and higher, so that eventually we would be living within a state of awareness in our circumstances where we really are experiencing the circumstances move in a way that responds, I guess, to this higher state of self-love and awareness of the moment. And can you describe more about that?
Well, the fascinating thing for me is just now, in this exact moment, we're very, very powerfully describing level 7. The product that I have, the Levels of Creating deck that you mentioned that's available on my website, goes to level 6. And we're unpacking, unfolding the energetics of level 7 very, very powerfully. And it's blowing my mind, to be frank. I am just blown away. I go to bed, I lay in bed, talk to Elohim for an hour about it, and I don't want to go to sleep because I'm so jazzed about hearing what they have to say about it. And the short version of it, because it's still unfolding, it's not describable in its complete nature yet. But the short version is, just as we said in level 4, I take 100% responsibility for my reactions to my experiences. In level 7, we say, every single thing in my life, in my awareness, that I encounter on the internet, that I see on TV, that I notice as I'm driving down the road, I put there.
We put it there for ourselves.
I put it there, and I used to think it was for ourselves or to learn from, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now I know there's something else to the equation. That's the juicy part for me, is I put it there as a physicalization, as a physical manifestation of a truth about myself, either on my soul level, my non-physical level, my physical level, my alternate expressions, which is, other lifetimes. Some aspect of myself is represented by everything I encounter so that I can see my truth physicalized.
Mm-hmm. It is hard to conceptualize, and yet there was something about the original teachings from so many traditions that lead some individuals to being able to be within the world and interacting with matter, with reality, in a way that is so much more advanced than people who were learning from them. Miracles happen and stuff like that. And it feels like this time of radical change in the world is a time when we're being flooded with consciousness, with awareness that we can be and we are evolving into the capacities to be that kind of avatar in this world. But in order to even approach that, all of these earlier levels of awareness are extremely important, and can't be kind of bypassed. There's not an instant enlightenment, that's going to just befall the earth and everybody will all of a sudden know how to collaborate and stop, being mad and things like that.
Well, for me, what's powerful about it is that I've read various texts that have described this state, this idea. It's not a foreign idea. Probably a lot of your listeners have encountered it. But the only place that I've experienced it explained step by step, where I can say to a person, okay, I can see how you're reacting to this. This is where you are. Here's how you step by step into this new reality, is with the Elohim material.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is extraordinary, is it's laid out. And the I am willing space allows you to walk those steps. And it's not a hidden secret thing. You don't have to be able to climb Mount Everest to get it. All you have to do is say, I am willing, and keep choosing.
And
Elohim says, we used to say, I created it. And Elohim says, no, let's do a different language now. Let's say, I am a chooser right now. I am a chooser on how I react to this experience.
And
not,
in this last minute of the hour, then, please give your information if anybody wants to follow up on this. And
I'm Veronica Torres. You can find all kinds of good information about me at Eloheim.com. That's ELOHEIM.com, ELOHEIM. I have 500 YouTube videos. I have a Facebook page. Even on Twitter, although I don't use it much. But if you want to connect, please do. And if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm in Sonoma. We have public events twice a month and lots of big events coming up in 2015, and we'd love to have you participate.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Veronica Torres.
I love being with you today.
Oh, I love you so much.
And aren't we lucky?
We are very, very fortunate. So
now I get to go out in the rain. I'm going to wear my rain boots.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay,
bye-bye. Thanks again.
So that's Veronica Torres in Sonoma channeling Elohim. And that was just a little taste of her experience of this wonderful wisdom. And the hour is closing out. This is Living Well and Dying Well with Margy Henderson. Stay tuned for Democracy Now! And then at 1 o'clock, John Sakowitz. So, thank you. And Living Well is available on so many different levels and layers in each of our lives, particularly by being the most authentic truth of ourselves with self-love and no judgment. That is just step one. And we can absolutely learn how to adore ourselves and all of our experiences at some point. Just from step-by-step awarenesses. So, living well and dying well.